it going.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. As usual, we have been talking before going live. So
about watching men not washing their asses and legs, apparently.
Yes, we've been having a more erudite panel discussion version of that infamous Martin Lawrence routine that almost got him kicked off of Saturday Night Live about washing your ass properly.
Because apparently, but hey, if anyone wants to know how to wash themselves properly, remember, Steve has a short about that.
I do have a video that will. Although as we discussed, I that video does not specify washing your ass, but it does specify washing pretty much every other part of you. So if you follow the philosophy of it, you would assume like, okay, well, I should be washing this part too, even though it is not specifically mentioned in the video.
I think
But
you two have combined said the word ass like 7 times since this started.
Well,
really a minute in.
Not as many times as that pop song from like years ago. That's like the opening track is like ass. It's a hit song.
Was that the Nicki Minaj song? Yeah.
I just remembered this awful line from the Afro Samurai video game. Like, she put both the asses in assassin.
Oh yeah, there's a movie in like a Idiocracy of ass. It was just an ass for 90 minutes, just like staring it on the screen, farting.
That's all this stream has been so far.
Just ass.
And
let's talk about something else.
As we're talking about cleaning asses, I'm drawn to the many lines in Clerks 2 about not going ass to mouth.
Oh God!
Which is also important for cleaning. Don't.
Yes, very much. I think my favorite.
Most of the audience has already jumped ship.
Yeah, I know. Oh, now they're talking ass to mouth. I'm out of here. I loved.
Dirty.
There was when Randall brought it up, and I love Dante's just absolute shocked indignance at the very idea, like the way you never go ass to mouth, like he wants to reach out and shake him, like what are you doing?
Oh, what a conversation to have as it's like your work day as well.
Hey.
So, I guess let's talk about something else.
Please.
Oh, I was gonna share what I got for Christmas, if that was.
Let's see.
Ooh, I got something pretty neat for Christmas too. So that'll come up in a bit. Okay. But go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, go for it, Isaiah.
So I kind of bought myself a lot of things for Christmas, like myself personally, and I think a few Ask-Aways ago I told Steve I was making like a cosplay of Guyon Bluford, the first African American in space.
Yes, absolutely.
And I bought the flight suits that they would wear back then on the early shuttle flights.
Oh, I love that.
Nice.
Very nice.
That's well done.
I love that.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah, and actually at the Kennedy Space Center, they have a space shuttle ride that you can simulate.
Nice.
You can simulate flying, and I'm gonna wear this with the helmet and everything when I go there.
Terrific.
Mm-hmm. And why did I think of Star Trek Enterprise when the moment you pulled that
yeah,
out?
exactly. That's what I like about those Enterprise uniforms, though, is that they're they look like flight suits.
They're transitionary.
Yeah.
From the style to the future style.
Yeah, but I mean specifically, like they're very clearly referencing. I mean, like to me, I always went to the blue NASA jumpsuits, like Isaiah was showing, because that's what they wore when I was growing up. When that's what the shuttle astronauts wore when they were boarding the shuttle. But
that's what I'm saying.
But it's a flight suit just in general,
But that's what I'm saying. It's ingenious that like if you're gonna make a Star Wars prequel set closer to our time, why wouldn't you make it look more like our time? Sorry, Star Trek. I've had Star Wars on the brain for the last 48 hours. Sorry.
well, that's the thing. There were a lot of people that were criticizing, the aesthetic of some of the machinery and equipment and controllers, and I'm like, as someone who does controls for a living, I'm like, they're like, wow, they're like, we have better technology now. It's like, yeah, but you know what? If you look at actually look at what was on the space shuttle, it was it was never bleeding edge. Because what's way more important than being bleeding edge is reliability.
Yeah, exactly.
Repairability and replaceability and all that kind of stuff. So so I'm like, no, that machinery was very recognizable to me. Plus the fact that, look, if you still have pipes with water or fluid or whatever, pipes are pipes, right? And so valves are valves, and you're going to have those things. In fact, it's kind of odd to me that, well, I guess because in Star Trek you have replicators, right? So then you don't need to transport material through pipes anymore. You can just use the replicator or whatever. But it made sense in in a pre-replicator world that you'd have pipes and valves and all sorts of stuff like that. I mean, how else is material going to get from one place to another?
And also, I mean, I appreciate it anytime a sci-fi property, especially Star Trek, because Star Trek is set so far in our future. Anytime that something can be done with the set design or the production design that makes it feel real and references something that we all understand and experience, like, even if you could say, like, well, I mean, it's the 24th century, they wouldn't have plumbing the same way we do. Okay, but that's something that we know. That's something that we recognize. And to me, that's more important than, because, like, I mean, the whole, like, what would it really be like? That ship has sailed. Like, that's not what Star Trek is about. Star Trek's not about saying, well, if we think about realistically projected, what would space flight look like in 300 years? We're past that. That's not what Star Trek is. That go do something else if that's what you're interested in.
Well, watch The Expanse.
Exactly. The Expanse is a great example. The Expanse is much. I mean, The Expanse has its fantastic stuff too, but it's much more,
grounded. Yeah.
It's easier. It's easier to believe that space flight in the future would be kind of like that, as opposed to Star Trek.
And I was going to bring up because I didn't like the show The Expanse. I watched like 5 or 6 episodes. I couldn't get into it. But the one thing about the show I liked is that yes, the ships and all that stuff was very believable.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll say this about The Expanse. It didn't grab me at first either. I watched the first season and was kind of like, okay, like, I guess I'll keep watching this. And it didn't really take a hold of me until the second season. When Jared Harris showed up, I was like, all right, I'm in. Because it was Jared Harris, and I'm like, I'll watch anything he fucking does. But the reason that I knew I really liked it was they write Jared Harris out, I think, after one season. So like Jared Harris is like a very important supporting character for one season, and then he's gone. And I was still interested in the show. It was like, oh, I must really like this. If they drop one of my favorite actors in the world into the middle of it, and then after one season he's gone, and I still want to watch it.
It was sort of for different reasons, but I mean, I didn't really catch on to Babylon 5 until John Sheridan showed up.
Same here.
Of course, with that episode with the Tricati. And that whole conflict there and how he handled it. I'll tell you, you want to talk about lighting a fire. The second season, came out of the gate like Secretariat on steroids.
Yeah. When I went back and I did a rewatch of Babylon 5 a couple years ago when it first popped up on Max. And I liked the first season better than I liked it the first time. Because I remember when it was originally on, I just kind of watched it out of habit because it came on after Star Trek. So I would just but I really didn't like the first season of Babylon 5. But the second season, when Bruce Boxleitner came on, all of a sudden it was like, oh man, like I'm going to watch this every week. But going back and rewatching it, the first season was not nearly as bad as I remembered. But still, there's still clearly a huge jump in quality from season 1 to season 2 for me. Anyway.
Well, at the same time, too, I mean, and Straczynski says this himself, that the first season is about introductions. It's about, setting the stage and letting us getting to know the characters. And then the second season, he calls it, I believe he calls it rising action. And of course, the key word is action. I mean, you're getting a little something. You're getting hints about the shadows and the old ones and all this other happy crap. But I think almost by definition, season 1 is never going to measure up to season 2. I think the real disappointment for me was season 5, because I think the writing really took a hit. The telepath story never resonated with me. But of course, they came down to the end at Sleeping in Light, and to this day, Sleeping in Light just slaughters me every time I watch it.
I mean, the things to remember with season 5 is that the telepath story was supposed to be the B story, not the A story. But because they compressed part of season 5 into season 4, because they thought they were going to get canceled. That screwed up season 5. That and the whole thing with letting Claudia Christian go. But the thing is about season 1 though, because I same thing. I've watched the series now like 4 times through, I think. And season 1 gets a lot of criticism, but even the episodes that are considered turkeys, like Believers and TKO, I think they're better than people give credit. Like especially like especially having been involved with the whole so-called great debate community, on YouTube, with the atheists and Christians and other fundamentalists and stuff like that, going back and forth. The Believers episode is a morality play, and it doesn't tell you what you should think about it. It just kind of throws it out there and says, hey, okay. And obviously people are going to be come down on different sides of that issue. And even TKO, which is probably the least good episode of that season. I think, the last time I watched it through, which again is like the 4th time, I still think it's better than it gets credit for. Because the whole idea is that humans are not accepted in the alien sphere, that we're kind of the out species, and then Walker Smith comes in and he earns the respect of the aliens. It's very much like a Rocky IV story basically. It's Rocky IV.
Wait, are you still talking about Babylon 5?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch that show.
Isaiah, your hands went up for a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say I never saw it either. But was anyone like a fan of the spaceship from The Martian, the movie The Martian? Was anyone a fan of that?
I really like the concept of it. I wasn't a big fan of the art design on that vehicle though.
Are you talking about the Martian?
The Matt Damon.
The Matt Damon,
yes.
Trapped on Mars.
Yeah.
Oh, that movie was awesome. I loved it.
That movie was really good. Yeah, I love that movie.
I thought the idea of having an ingress-egress point running through the center of the ship, and then having the engines built around it, if you can engineer that right, and insulation and structural whatever have you, I think it's practical as hell, especially for a tall ship. I mean, who here remembers Men into Space? Anybody remember that at all? There was an early show. I thought it was pretty well done for early 1960s. And I mean, they had this tall 2-stage ship that landed on the moon, and I mean, it's basically like the limb, except that it was much, much, much larger. It's the same concept. Hey, you have something to land you and something to get you basically back off the moon, and then separate the last stage, and that takes you home. But in that case, they had the ladder going down the side. And all you need to do is miss one rung, and
but on the moon you're gonna fall really softly.
For man,
right on the moon you're gonna be okay.
I like how high it is. Yeah,
I do like. I do like in sci-fi shows and movies when they have what appears to be superficially like plausible spacecraft design, where you can tell that they weren't. The design team wasn't directed to make it look cool or to make it look, like Star Warsy or Star Trekky. It looks like I love the Discovery one in 2001. I love
that was classic.
Because it's sort of bulky, and it's this long thing, and it doesn't look sleek. It looks like a cargo ship or like a ship that was designed. Yeah, it looks practical.
It looks like what a ship should of that nature. Yeah. It has the dimensions you would think of a ship, and which is one of the things I like about the Excelsior, because of all the various versions of the Enterprise, it has closer. It doesn't exactly hit it, but it has closer to those normal dimensions that you would think of a ship with the engines in the back propelling it forward.
Yeah.
That's why it's my favorite. But
speaking of 2001, actually, like 2010 better. And
the
Alexei Leonov was great with the rotating section, and I swear, I think everybody realizes that was the inspiration for the Earth Alliance destroyers in Babylon 5.
Yes.
Yeah, which I was going to mention those too. Yeah, because I like those. I like the Earth Force ships in Babylon 5 for the same reason, because they look like more of a practical design. And of course, Babylon 5 had both, because it had the you know, the little fighter ships that look Star Wars inspired and are really sleek and cool and badass, and then it has the big sort of aircraft carrier type ships that are more clunky and, you know, chunky and more functional.
My wife Suzanne says that she can always tell the Earth Alliance ships because they're ugly.
but even the fighters in Babylon 5 were designed to move through dimensionally. They were not designed to go like X-wings where they go and make these sweeping maneuvers, right? And that's a cool thing because it takes we don't have to imitate science one-to-one, mostly because our science understanding is going to move very quickly. So you know what people thought was capable in 1950s today is like laughable, right? But you can use it as an influence, like, oh, this is a cool idea. What can I make with this? And that's what I liked about other things about Babylon 5, stuff like that. Also, going back a little bit to that is that Straczynski did the anti-mix mystery box. He was somebody who posed a question and he answered it.
Yes.
You know, he had these questions, these are the premises, these are the question, we're going to answer it because he understood that for every answer, you get more questions.
Right.
So that's how you keep the audience engaged. It's not simply a matter of, we'll tell you when we figured out after throwing all these darts in the wall. Maybe sometime. Sure.
Yeah, well, he had the whole thing structured from the beginning. I mean, the whole point of Babylon 5 was the quote novel for television, end quote. And he leaves some trailing ends, strings at the end, which is wonderful because you can build on that and do things like, I mean, admittedly, Crusade, as far as I'm concerned, I thought that was a failure, but there was still the opportunity there to build on it, and that's what I loved about it.
Well, one of the things I like about the Star Furies is that since they do move like real physics model and they're inertial. And in fact, like I remember like early in this series where they're fighting Raiders and the Raiders behind them. And then they just rotate.
Because they can do that. Yeah,
and because they're working, outside of atmosphere, they're they're not in a gravity well. So you're actually standing up. Of course, standing up doesn't mean anything when you got no gravity.
Yeah, well, and that also benefits you in terms of being able to, because there are still G's that you're taking when you're maneuvering, but that depends on in what vector are you taking those G's.
Right.
I mean, and that's the same idea that the F-16 was designed against when they took the pilots and they leaned them back 30 degrees, because the one thing about the 16 is the fact that it will turn at 9 Gs and the C model would turn at 10. And if you can survive 10 Gs, you have my deep respect.
Well, Nick, you were trying to say something a minute ago.
I've been trying to say something for a while. Look, something you're going to notice about me, if you haven't noticed it by now, is anytime I hear somebody else's voice, I clam up. I'm like, oh, I can't interrupt them, even if they technically interrupted me because I started first. I don't know. Maybe that's some childhood thing. But anyway,
makes sense.
I want to say one thing I appreciate about Babylon 5, considering there's only so much they can do with the actors, just putting stuff on their foreheads. I appreciate that the ships look very alien. Like, those are some wicked ship designs. Many of them look almost like they're alive, like they're giant fish or something. And I just love how bold they are with it.
White Star. I mean, jeez.
Yeah.
There's this one just called the Shadow, and it looks like this big evil butterfly skeleton thing. It's great.
Yeah.
They're so
did
creative.
Babylon 5 did a really good job, I thought. And this was really impressive given when it was produced and the fact that it was made in the middle of sort of the renaissance of Star Trek, with all these Star Trek shows and movies being produced at the same time. And of course there were always the comparisons between Babylon 5 and specifically Deep Space Nine. But Babylon 5 managed to create a look and an aesthetic in terms of its character designs and especially the ships that was definitely not Star Trek.
Because here's the thing about like spaceships, they're a great way to show you. I mean, if you can't actually go to their planet and have a whole set design showing their architecture and stuff, giving us a look at their spaceships and maybe even the interior of those is a great second, because it tells us what aesthetics they find pleasing. It tells us about their art design, about their
culture.
Yeah. So every time we see a spaceship from some alien race, that's our first impression of what they're like. And I just think that's a great way to communicate that quickly.
Yeah. When Nick talks about how the ships of Babylon 5 look like they're alive, don't forget Moya from Farscape, which is alive. So
yes.
Well,
that's
and
living
also,
inside of a living creature in space. That would be interesting.
And also, as it comes to the shadow ships, keep in mind that they were effectively, I believe, if they weren't quite living, they needed living people as their central processing units, and as what's his name said in that episode that ended, I believe, the third season, you don't come out of them quite the same. So the whole interaction there strikes me as being, shall we say, problematic.
Yeah,
I've seen screen caps of what they look like up close, the texture, and they're covered in all these weird holes and grooves. They look like they're made of coral, like they were grown from sea sponges.
Yeah, the shadow ships are a really cool design. I want to follow up on something that Raphael said a minute ago about how JMS used anti-mystery box storytelling. That made me, which I agree with and I do appreciate, because as much like the thing about mystery box storytelling, or whether we call it mystery box or not, like just building your entire story around a single reveal that you push to the very end, which has become like the default storytelling mode of a lot of streaming shows.
Yeah.
The problem with that is if that payoff isn't worth it, then the whole thing feels like a waste of time. If you build everything, because I felt that, like, that was my feeling for a couple of the seasons of like the newer Star Trek shows, even the ones that I've liked, like Star Trek Discovery, for the most part I've enjoyed. But Discovery has this bad habit of building the entire season around a particular mystery or a particular thing, and they hold it off until like the second to last episode, and then it's like, okay, this better be good. Because if it's not, then the whole thing is just like, what was the point of this? And I've become so used to that, and I've gotten to the point where I just expect it, because it's so commonplace now, that when I see a show that doesn't do it, I'm like pleasantly surprised, and I'm instantly even more interested in the show than I would have been. Like, I've been going back over the last few weeks and catching up on Doctor Who, because I never really watched Doctor Who. And then I started watching it a few years ago, and I watched the Christopher Eccleston season, the first revival season, and then I got away from it for a while, and then I came back and got away from it again. So I finished all of the David Tennant seasons, and I'm a little more than halfway.
For Matt Smith.
I'm a little more than halfway through the first Matt Smith season, and
he's a lot of fun.
Oh, he's terrific. I'm enjoying it. What I noticed in the first Matt Smith season was in the first couple episodes, they set up little things that I assumed would just carry through to the end of the season and then would pay off in the season finale, like Amy getting married, leaving the night before her wedding. And this first couple episodes, they put in little reminders of like, oh, she left the night before her wedding. Look, there's her wedding dress in her closet. And I thought, okay, that's something that they'll come back to at the end of the season. Like, that'll be a big moment when she has to choose between her fiance and the doctor. Like, that's like an end of season thing. No, they do that like in episode 3 or 4. And I was like, oh, no shit. All right.
Doctor Who.
Matt Smith. It's actually kind of sad, because there are other mysteries and stuff in Moffat seasons that do that, and not even like they finish at the end of the season. It's like at the end of the season, you're like, remember this for next season. It's like, no.
Yeah, I've heard that eventually. I've heard from other people that eventually the writing does start to suffer, but like I noticed in the last Tennant season, they did a really good job with that stuff as well, of not so much doing what I like to see in seasons of television, where they'll just remind you about something. It won't even, you can't even really call it like a storyline. It's just something will come up and they'll just like
a callback.
A callback. I think it was the last Tennant season, where the bit with the bees disappearing, where like that's not like a storyline at all. It's not a plot. It's just a thing that is happening that the characters every so often will remind you is happening. Like somebody will just mention it, just so it stays in your head.
Yeah.
And then eventually it goes somewhere. You know what I mean? But other than stuff like that, the episodes are self-contained, which I've said I've preached relentlessly, like that is the best way to do a TV series. You know, do self-contained episodes with little things sprinkled throughout that carry through from that tie it together. But yeah, so whenever I see and I mean, granted, the season of Doctor Who I'm watching now is like 13 years old. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily super contemporary, but it's relatively recent. And it's nice to see something that is like a season of television that is serialized to an extent, but it's not the, you know, hyper serialized, every episode is a chapter. It doesn't make sense unless you watch the whole thing. And also it's all built up toward this single reveal at the very end that may or may not pop, you know, because that kind of storytelling I feel like is problematic at best. It's very difficult to pull off.
And potentially very disappointing if it doesn't work.
Definitely.
The book that I'm working on right now, actually, there's something else I have to bring up before I forget. Just remind me in a minute, I guess.
Sure.
The book I'm working on now, it has a lot of mystery, but it's not the kind that's like artificially held off. You're constantly being drip-fed things, and it just comes up naturally in the characters' conversations or little observations they make, and then somebody corrects them, something like that. And each revelation just makes you ask more questions like, well, okay, you say that, but why is that like that? You know? And I'm just having a blast with this one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know part of it is, I'm sure, you know, part of the reason that I feel the way I do about it is because that's how I was taught, you know, when I took writing classes.
I'm not saying it to contradict anything you said. I'm saying,
well, no, I'm saying, okay. I understand. I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just saying, like, I like the way you're describing writing your story and the way I'm describing, you know, the kind of writing that I enjoy. Like, when I was taught how to put a story together, like how to structure a narrative, when you get to a plot point, that's supposed to push the story in a different direction. You know, you're supposed to, so whether it's the answer to a mystery or a choice a character makes or a conflict that, you know, has a particular result, like whatever happens when you get to a plot point, that's supposed to push things in another direction. And that's what keeps the story moving. That's what keeps it feeling fresh and interesting. And, you know,
that's what I'm doing, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know. That's why I'm saying this. And with a lot of the sort of mystery box storytelling, it's like they don't do that so much. Everything keeps moving in the same direction.
Right.
You know, for a really long time.
Dragged along.
See, that's the thing. Like that approach you're talking about, Steve. Now, I'm not a writer, but you know, except like I do. You know, I've been playing, you know, Dungeons and Dragons and similar RPGs for 35, almost going on 40 years. And I guess it is more than 40 years now. And so, and most of that time I've been a game master, dungeon master, whatever term you want to use. Game manager that some people use. So when I write an adventure, I write a timeline of what the antagonists are going to be doing. And then I have a tree that says, okay, what based on, you know, like I'm trying to like predict what the players may do. And then what impact that will have. So those become plot points. That, okay, if they choose this, that drives the story in this direction. If they choose this other thing, it drives the story in another direction. So if they do nothing, the story goes linear. As they interact with the events, that pushes the story. So those become plot points. But I have to kind of guess what those might be in advance.
Right.
And then if they go in a direction I didn't predict, now I have to revise my tree because I have to now take into account the actions that they have, which is like, because there's some GMs, what they do is they kind of have that, but then if the players go off the rails, they try to force them back on. And the thing about the role playing is it's interactive storytelling, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And so I don't do that. I let it go where they're going to go because it's their story. I'm the narrator, but it's their story.
Yeah.
So I have to then adapt my plot points because now a new set of plot points may arise because they've guided the story in a way I didn't predict.
Oh yeah, it's definitely better to yes and your players as opposed to no butting them.
So one thing I want to point out, so about like, you know, when you have a mystery going, there's always some chance that the viewer or reader is going to solve the mystery before the characters do. How do the characters react? And there's this one moment 1,500 pages into my series now, 100 pages into this latest book, where the protagonist Minnow gets this big reveal, and she already figured it out. Like I could have played it up and had it be like, no, and like the crazy music plays like they would do it in a movie, trying to squeeze the maximum drama they can out of the moment. And here it's like she already suspected and was just waiting for someone to pull the trigger. And that's an approach that I don't think you see a lot, because I think it makes moments feel anticlimactic and people will be like, oh, I was expecting to get like an endorphin rush from that, and there's nothing. It's like, yeah, well, how do you think the character feels?
Right. Well, and you have to, when you're writing something like that, or when you're writing anything really, I mean, you have to balance, your desire to surprise the audience or to get a particular reaction from the audience with what is right for the story.
Yeah.
And one of the things that frustrates me when I'm, watching a movie or a TV show or reading a book or whatever is when it feels like the writer has made a particular choice because they want to shock the reader rather than because that's the right direction for the story to take. Like sometimes you don't want your writing to be predictable. You want things to be surprising. You want to do things that you hope the audience didn't see coming. But at the same time, you don't want to be so devoted to that you're not telling the story the way it ought to be told. And sometimes doing the predictable thing is the right move. And sometimes that can be sad, and that can be satisfying to an audience too. And it's just
the consequences have to follow the antecedents, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, I have a great example in the show Oz. I don't know if anyone saw the show Oz. So there's a character, Cyril O'Reilly. He's scheduled to be executed because he did some bad stuff, and he's so leading up to the execution. There's this really emotional thing. His brother is in prison also, and he's the reason why his brother's on death row. And so they have in Oz, basically the guys are all their pods are all like they have see-through like plexi rather than regular walls. So he's in the middle of the common area, just kind of like trying to work off the energy because he's not allowed to go to witness the execution, and all the other prisoners, in respect to him, they all go to their pod and they start slapping the walls, and it makes this sound, and Cyril's getting ready, and you're getting ready for this emotional release, because as much as Cyril did something bad, he's also he had had a head trauma, and so he's very malleable, manipulated. He can be very manipulated very easy, so he's not really at fault for what he did. He really shouldn't be being executed because he doesn't have the mental capacity to really understand what he was doing. And so you're all ready for this emotional release, and then there's a reprieve from the governor. Okay, so that gets pulled back. So you're like, so it's like the emotional equivalent of blue balls,
Right.
But then like 2 episodes later, it happens again, and they do the exact same setup, and then he gets executed. But because he, the writer had done this. This thing where he pulled it right out from under your last second. Then when it actually happens, I can't speak for anybody else, but I felt nothing.
Yeah,
I felt because I've already been through this already.
Yeah,
but I felt nothing, and I was like, dude, you robbed the audience. I mean, yes, because he was very big on like I'm gonna foil your expectations and all this kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he robbed the viewer of a really good emotional outlet. Same thing. I actually met Ernie Hudson and at Gen Con, And we're talking about show because his character gets killed in the penultimate episode, the last thing that happens in the penultimate episode. And the things what happens, he said the reason why that happened is that Tom Fontana is the writer. Is that early at the beginning of the season, Tom Fontana made it clear that a bunch of regular characters were going to die. And so in an interview with Ernie Hudson, somebody asked Ernie, hey, do you think your character will die this season? And he's like, well, I don't think so. My character's pretty pivotal, but if I do, it won't be until the last episode. So Tom Fontana has him killed at the very last moment in the next to last episode just to foil Ernie Hudson. I'm like, wow, you're not a great writer. You're just a prick.
That kind of thing happens a lot nowadays. Like with Game of Thrones, there were a couple of times where people guessed where the story was going, so they changed it because we can't have people spoil it. And that's apparently what they think their job is now, is to outsmart Reddit. But that's the thing I've noticed.
Good.
Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
That's the unfortunate thing I've noticed about a lot of media nowadays. More so the streaming services, but also some movies in theaters. They're not made to leave a lasting impact. You're not supposed to still be talking about them a year from now. They're made to generate hype for a week. They want you to post YouTube reactions and talk about it on Twitter, and then that's it. Move on to the next thing.
That's why I don't watch that's why I don't want the trailers for movies. If I'm going to see this movie, I don't want to see the trailers because I don't want to be spoiling the movie or be part of the conversation leading up to the movie. I want to be the part of the conversation after the movie.
Yeah, well, that's a problem that a lot of these trailers have come up with lately. Is that I mean, how many of us have seen trailers where they almost give up the entire movie in the trailer?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's tiresome as hell. The well-scored trailer is the one that will pique your interest, but not really give away anything critical. I mean, it'll give you a taste of it, but I mean, the major plot points are they're still holding tight to their chest, and that's what makes it work.
The worst trailers are the ones that play like the preview for the next episode of a TV show because it's like
on the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
It's a standard thing for TV episode previews because they want you to watch the next episode. But
same bat time, same bat channel.
Especially if there's if the episode has if the upcoming episode has an important guest star. Right, they'll make sure that that's in the preview. Like next week on whatever, so and so is going to be here, blah blah blah. And then
Arthur.
Yeah, and exactly that would be impressive nowadays.
Yes.
And then you watch the episode, and when that guest star shows up, it's written as like a surprise. They sort of show up, and it's like kind of a reveal, but. It's not surprising because you knew they were going to be there because they were in the preview. And there are a lot of movie trailers that work the same way where they'll advertise a particular character or a particular actor or show you a piece of a particular scene. And then you watch the movie and that was supposed to be a surprise. If you had just gone into the movie cold, you might have been surprised, but you weren't because you saw the trailer and you knew that, Tom Hanks was going to be in it. Because he was in the trailer, you know what I mean? So
my biggest problem with this strategy of the people guessed how the story's gonna go. Now we have to change it because they spoiled it. That's just discouraging people from engaging with media. Saying no, don't make theories. Don't try to figure out where. Just react to it, and then just consume.
Well,
that's all they want to do.
Because go ahead.
I just want to add to what Nick said. I mean, going back to the RPG thing. To me, that's the sign that a lot of bad GMs do exactly that. Like the players have kind of figured out, the secret ahead of time, and then GMs they say, well, yeah, I get it. Well, yeah, you're going to defeat my monster easily, or my big bad, or whatever it is, too easily, or whatever. So therefore, I have to change things up. And it's like, but no, let it happen. If the viewer, whether it's the viewer or the player, in either case, if they get it. Good for them.
Yeah. I want to get back to that, but Isaiah, your hand has been up for a little bit. Go for it.
I'm actually rewriting my Moth story in which the action happens much sooner in the movie. And would you be okay if I like a script to read and I guess I don't know if you want to do this, Steve, but just give me some pointers or something. I don't know if you do this, and it's okay if you don't.
I probably am not going to have time to read it. to be honest. So like, in under the best of circumstances, I mean, I would be happy to, give pointers or whatever, but I'm not going to promise you that because I probably won't have time to read it. I mean, if you have particular problems or particular questions about like a given scene or something, or a given, you're at a point in your plot where you're not sure where to go, like I'd be happy to give you advice on specific things, but I'm not going to have time to read an entire script.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, it's the whole thing with changing a story because somebody guessed where it was going to go or whatever. Like, it's not the storyteller's job to outsmart the audience.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of
Reddit.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. To outsmart Reddit. And the other thing is, if someone guesses where the story is going to go, that's not a spoiler.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a spoiler. If you see the movie and you know what happens, and then you come back and tell everybody, that's a spoiler. If you just guess what might happen and you're right, that's not a spoiler.
Right.
And if you're the writer or producer or whatever of a movie and you see like, people on Twitter or on Reddit are talking about what might happen in your movie and they've gotten it right, they're okay.
And we want to see it happen. We're still kind of excited to see it happen.
Yeah. If you do a good enough job, if you do your job as storytellers, it's not going to matter if they knew what was going to happen or not. And that's the thing that I wish people would realize, because like I understand wanting to avoid spoilers when I talk about stuff that is relatively recent or even stuff that's old. Like when I do my Star Trek old episode reviews, I put a spoiler warning in the front of it because I know even though I'm talking about stuff that's been out for decades, like not everybody has seen everything. So
Darth
just in
Vader's
case,
Luke Potter, come on, people.
Yeah, it's like, but yeah, exactly. But so I understand wanting to avoid spoilers, but at the same time, like, once you've seen a movie one time, you know all the spoilers. And a good movie or a good book or a good whatever, like if it's really good and it really means something to you and you really like it, you'll be able to go
watch it again. Yeah, that is
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Steve?
And you'll know everything that happens in it and you'll still enjoy it. And sometimes you'll maybe even enjoy it more.
Or
find
new
story
things
hinges on being consumed spoiler free. If that's the only way it can be enjoyable, then it's not a good story.
Yeah,
I agree.
One of the things
I agree.
One of the things that Straczynski has said before is that he hates mysteries where there's information hidden from the reader that they couldn't possibly have figured it out. He's like, if you do that, that's lazy writing. You actually should be putting it all out so that people could potentially figure it out before the characters do. That's actually good writing.
Yes.
Here's the thing too. They may anticipate, he's sort of telegraphed this and this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Question is, how is it going to happen? How is he going to introduce it? There are details in there that matter. And that is what makes it, worth seeing for the first time. And if it's done well, as Steve said, worth seeing again and again.
How many of your favorite movies do you know every single word? Like you can recite the entire script, yet you still watch them just because the story's that good. You're still caught up in it.
Absolutely.
Surprise!
I stopped counting it 100 times.
And even stories that are mystery stories that are structured to be mysteries and to have a reveal at the end. Like, I love Sherlock Holmes. I've read every Sherlock Holmes short story. I know what the solution to all of the mysteries are. I still love reading those stories. That's finding out the answer to the mystery is not the only thing that is appealing. People, I have never been and not because I have anything against her, but just like I've never gotten into Agatha Christie's work. But my God, people who are Agatha Christie's fans read her and reread her and reread her over and over and over again. It doesn't matter that they know the solution to the mystery. That's not the point.
It's the journey to get to that point.
I'm the same way with Robert Heinlein. I have. Ever since I read, my mom got me Starship Troopers when I was 10 years old, and I was way not ready for it. And yet somehow that sunk the hook in me. A little bit later on, we were going to read, get this. I think was either freshman or senior in college, and we were doing Stranger in Strangeland, which is without a doubt Heinlein's most infamous novel. And I have reread it, and somehow I always manage to find something in it. And Lauren, I love his voice. I love how Lauren, he approaches things.
I would love to talk to you someday about Starship Troopers, and I want to understand what you see in it that I don't. Because to me, it was the most dull thing that I've ever written. I read the book up until the penultimate, and up to and including the penultimate chapter. And at that point, I'm like, well, it's not going to suddenly get exciting and interesting in the last chapter. So fuck it.
No, and it didn't. I mean, I still have a tough time with Starship Troopers because of the philosophy behind it, because it's a fascist philosophy.
Yes, it is.
But
at least the movie recognizes the satire.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I mean, the movie. I mean, as tough as Starship Troopers is, the movie is a travesty. And
I love it.
Never mind the sequels, which are completely insane.
The sequels are terrible. I've seen the sequels; they're terrible.
Yeah, but the thing I always loved about Heinlein is that not only will he make you think, he'll make you evaluate what you think and why. And even if you completely disagree with him, he will stir you up, and that is, to me, is the value of Robert Heinlein.
Yeah. Okay, a bunch of people have their hands up, so I want to get to everybody. So, Raphael, your hand's been up for a little while. Go for it.
Yeah, I was going to basically recapitulate what we were talking about mysteries in the sense of that I call that rewarding the reader.
Yeah.
Right. If the reader or the viewer is invested in what you're making, they want to know if they're right. And so if it comes to that point, you're not, why change it when it doesn't have any, you haven't done a proper setup, you haven't put the gun on the mantle and say, oh, it has to be this because you're so afraid that they're going to figure it out. If they want to figure it out, it's because they're paying attention. You have them where you want them. Don't throw that away. That's kind of what happened with the Game of Thrones. Part of it also, they were so locked and like, this has to be the ending, no matter what, that they're not going to change it, right? And to tie back to Babylon 5, one of the things that Straczynski did was he had stay patches for actors because he knew that television was and still very fickle. So actors would come and go. Some of them might even die during production. So it's like, I have to adapt. The story that he had originally was not the story that he had later. And to tie into another thing like Star Wars, anybody read the Star Wars comic book from Dark Horse?
Yeah,
Mm.
It's not good.
No, I haven't.
But it's interesting to see the way the evolution of the writing, right? Where Lucas was earlier on, probably this wasn't even the first draft, it was like an early draft, and what he ended up with.
Well, and to that regard, I've seen what the original, because it was in the one of the script books of what the original timeline was supposed to be for Babylon 5. I'm glad we got the one we got, because quite frankly, I don't think the one that he originally set out was going to be all that good.
And none of them survive. They're not going to survive. It comes into the real world, and other people look at it, and editors and all are like, "Yeah, Michael, this is, this works. This doesn't work. You got to have.
It's good to have some people. It's good to have some people to challenge you, as it were, because like if people are just like, "Yes, let's go with this. Yes, let's go with this." Look at the prequel trilogies and what Lucas did.
Like, he didn't have somebody telling him stop. Well, I think most of us know too. Have you ever seen? There's a great video on YouTube called "How Star Wars Was Saved in the Edit."
Yes, that was a
fantastic video.
Yeah,
and what he had originally, and it's the same stuff he filmed, but the way he had put it out there and some of the superfluous crap that he had filmed would have been a train wreck and never would have become the phenomenon that it became. But but other people said, we
gotta have tension in this scene, and it's just like the tension.
And it's worth noting too, there were 3 editors on that, including his wife.
They had
a team working on that son of a pup.
And it is, and it's usually, it happens over and over again, but a lot of times if you, especially in the case of Star Wars, with Lucas being, the guy who conceived the whole thing and the writer and the director, sometimes you're too close to it and you need someone who is not as attached to it as you are, because often it is just a really, it's something that is storytelling 101. Like, there's no tension in this scene. And you would think that like that would be something that a writer would be able to detect for themselves. Like, why isn't this working? Oh, there's no tension in this scene. There's nothing for the audience to be edgy about. There's nothing, there's no suspense.
Is approaching in 5 minutes.
It's funny. Just realizing how many things now make sense. Like, oh, really? You mean to tell me the guy who was separated from his mother as a kid and was isolated from any girls and women outside the order doesn't know how to talk to them? For like 10 years.
Weird.
Well,
no wonder he's such a creepo towards Padme.
The only two consistent characters throughout all 9 movies, or stories, was actually supposed to be R2 and C-3PO.
Right.
Like, it was actually supposed to be, I think he said the original concept was supposed to be a story about the world going around these 2 droids. But
not a bad concept. I like it.
I mean,
so who's next?
The lowly ones from the Hidden Fortress, right?
That's right.
Oh yeah,
that's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. So 255D said earlier in the chat, what's the point in foreshadowing stuff if you want the audience to not have any way of figuring it out? Which is goes back to like our earlier conversation. It's like, no, like a good writer wants the audience to figure it out. I can also say this to myself when like years ago when I was regularly going to movie theaters and then making movie reviews on my YouTube channel. I stopped doing that because I got lazy. Even though I cannot turn off my reviewer brain as I'm watching something, as were, that means I'm actively watching it, as it were, too. And if I'm actively watching something and engage with what's happening, even if I figured out something like that, I can still go, oh wait, they did that brilliantly because they blah 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 blah, and then like I somehow type up review in my brain as well, too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, foreshadow, there's different kinds of foreshadowing. Sometimes something will happen in a story and it's obviously foreshadowing, or it seems like it's obviously foreshadowing. You're like, okay, they're setting something up for later with this. But there's also the kind that, and this is one of my favorite things that I find in stories, when I'm encountering them for the first time, is when you get to a payoff that is for a setup that you didn't realize was a setup. That can happen too. And again, it's not about, surprising the audience and trying to, outthink the audience, but, sometimes there is a great pleasure to be had, and you get to a point in a story where something happens that pays off something earlier that you didn't even realize was setting anything up.
Right.
And then it gets there and you're like, oh, that's so good.
Well, and in that regard too, for one thing, it's okay for a writer to throw a misdirection, have, in addition to real foreshadowing, have some foreshadowing that's a red herring.
Yeah. Sure.
But then you've still done the job of putting it all out there. You've just thrown some side things out there to try to throw people off the scent. But you've been fair and giving them all the information they need to figure it out.
But the thing about red herrings is that they have to be plausible. In other words,
yes,
the red herring is a red herring because it was the path not taken, not because it was implausible.
I have a red herring to share with you when we stop recording.
Oh boy!
Okay, no, Isaiah.
Oh no, yeah, Isaiah, your hands up.
Speaking of movies that I guess we can. Speaking of like movies that I think that we don't like.
Yeah,
I watched this again last night.
Armageddon. That Michael Bay movie.
I'm gonna be honest.
Go for it. No, please.
I don't know why I like it. I guess because it's just stupid.
Yes,
it's really stupid. It's a really stupid fucking movie.
It's in my collection too. Don't feel bad.
And watching it, drunk or something like that. Get a better feel for the visuals because it is a very visual movie, and as I was autistic, I do love visuals a lot.
Isaiah, you don't need all these qualifiers. It's fine. Like, I hate how people call it guilty pleasures because it implies that you're not supposed to like it,
right?
And it's just some character flaw that you do. No, look, I've seen so many people cry at that movie when what's Bruce Willis, Harry, when he blows himself up, and the asteroid. It's not terrible. It's fine.
That's a really good way to put it. It's a good way to put it, Nick. It's not a character flaw liking the movie. Like it doesn't. There's no trash.
Hey, there are movies that I like that I know are objectively not great movies.
Sure.
Look, most of you guys are probably too young to know, but maybe Lauren knows it. There's a movie with starring Mark Blingfield called Jekyll and Hyde Together Again.
Sorry, no.
It is objectively not a good movie, and I fucking love it. And I feel no guilt whatsoever. Like Nick said, it's not a character flaw that I like this movie. I just fucking
like I use the term guilty pleasure just to sort of to categorize movies like that, but I feel no actual guilt. You know what I mean? Yeah, great trash.
In this corner, Joe.
Oh my goodness! All the talk of mystery movies and revealing the things early. Yeah. I'm just reminded about just how much I love Rian Johnson's writing.
I couldn't.
Two movies. Am I still?
I can't hear you.
Still muted. Am I?
You're a little low, but
I can turn that up a bit.
Yeah.
Is that better?
A little bit.
It's about the same.
Now, do your thing.
Just scream. Just blow out the mic.
What about now?
Not the same.
Darn it.
Well, just go for it.
Just project.
Okay.
Just project.
Like you're in theater.
That's so weird. Wonder why it's not. Okay. Anyway.
Different microphone probably he's using.
Yeah. I mean, you're audible. Really? Like I can hear you. You're just a little
okay.
low.
So, all the talk of mysteries and that reminds me just how much I love the way Rian Johnson, particularly in his two mystery movies.
Yeah.
Just the early reveals, the switches on what was, what the mystery was or what the focus was, just playing around in the mystery genre with that was so good. And also because it is close to the end and we started with revealing fun stuff for Christmas, I got this. Printed desk lamp of the Death Star.
Oh, that's awesome! Oh, hey, check that out.
So I have something that I did not get for Christmas. It wasn't that kind of present, but it was sent to me from a fan to film and feature in a video. They basically sent me some Lego Batman stuff that you might recognize. Here's the 60s Batmobile. There's Adam West with his can of shark repellent.
That's awesome.
Here is the Tim Burton film's design of the Batmobile.
Always liked that one.
Look
that's my favorite.
It is.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Here is the Batwing from that same movie.
Oh yeah,
nice.
Here is we're not done yet. There's more. Here's the Tumbler.
Oh, the Tumbler. Yeah,
trilogy, where it was just a tank.
Yeah.
And here is the newest version from The Batman.
Oh, nice. I love that one too.
Nice.
I love that one too.
Nice
that
collection.
One,
very nice.
Now keep in mind, I'm not keeping these. I'm sending them back to in a couple of days. But yeah, this fan was generous
really
enough
cool.
to send me these visual aids so I could show what I'm talking about in this video. So
pretty awesome.
That's awesome.
Nick reminded me of a response video I never made to Steve about Steve. You did that video about does Batman really have to be a billionaire?
Oh yes.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of unfortunately the answer is probably yes.
Almost certainly yes.
and I'll explain why. But I'm not a billionaire, so but my Christmas present, I actually didn't ask for anything because I don't need anything.
Yes,
but to me, I guess my Christmas thing, was to myself, although it was to other people, but it was kind of cool. So, so 20, I think I mentioned probably a couple of times in the past, 2022 was a horrible year for me business-wise. I had to put a lot of money back in to keep the business afloat. But this year was great. It was our best year ever. It could have been better, but there's people are very slow to pay bills, which is annoying. But we did well enough that I was actually able to give double the bonus and double the raises that I've done.
Excellent.
Nice.
So
awesome.
that made me feel good that I was actually finally in that position and I could do that.
So we didn't need to have Randy
Nice.
kidnap you and put you in a bow and take you to the Griswold's house.
I want to do that anyway. I do this. Yeah, sweetie.
I'm gonna agree with you, Steve. I actually do like now that I'm like 31, even though I don't look it, but like now that I'm like 31 and I've actually I wasn't born when either Home Alone or National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation came out, but I gotta say, I know we have like differing tastes on movies, me, you, and Jason, but I will agree with you that I didn't find Home Alone, the 1990 Home Alone, funny as National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. I didn't funny.
So as a comment, Isaiah, so like it's not unusual. Like autistic people, for whatever reason, tend to look a little younger than everyone else. There are theories why, like, oh, maybe it's because we don't emote with our faces as much, or so we stretch them out slower. So I don't know. There's like a million reasons.
Interesting.
Point is, it's not that unusual if you're autistic that you look a little young. People kept telling me, like when I was in my 20s in YouTube videos, like, "Oh, shut up, you little boy," because I thought I was still 15. Anyway, okay. Something I gotta say before I forget.
Go for it.
Something kind of crazy happened this month. I got famous. My work was featured on the NASDAQ Tower in Times Square.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
Seriously.
That's amazing.
Planet Ripple at
out.
That's awesome.
But it was featured alongside other people's books. We were all like winners of the Book Fest contest.
Oh, cool.
Congratulations. Yeah, it played
outstanding.
15 seconds at a time, 50 times throughout the day on December 13th.
Okay.
That's
so cool.
That is
cool.
so
cool.
Nice.
Is anyone, speaking of Times Square, is anyone going to watch the ball drop tonight? Or
No,
I might.
I'm going to be in bed by 10 o'clock. That's my bed. That's
so
my.
Like if anybody here wants to see them, just DM me or whatever, and I'll show them. Actually, I've just posted them publicly as well.
Now,
I'll be up at the time of the ball drop, but I just never pay attention. I mean, I'm a vampire. I stay up till 2-3.
Well, before we close out completely,
go for it.
Thank you. One thing quickie I wanted to share about my Christmas, which was pretty neat. My wife has been going, frankly, nuts on me. As you may recall, last year, she got us tickets to Hamilton, which, as I think I stated before in another Hangout, I mean, you can see the Disney thing and it's wonderful. To see it on stage, fasten your seatbelt because it's fantastic. This year, I mean, a couple of things that were really nice. One of the things I really dug was the fact that she got me Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk, which I don't know how many of you guys know the story of Shostakovich, but Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk damn near killed him because Stalin saw it. He got bent out of shape, muddle instead of music, whole 9 yards, and that was great. But it wasn't the highlight because the very last thing I opened was 2 tickets to the 2024 Indianapolis 500.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. I've wanted to do the Brickyard since I was aware of that, and that goes back 60 years easily. And when I literally went to a closed circuit TV, and watched Mario Andretti. And I believe it was the 1964 Indy, and just watch him tear up the track. And I fell in love with Indy at that time. And now we're going to actually go see it. And that's going to be
really cool.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
A friend of mine also got me this for Christmas too.
Whoa.
Nice.
Is that nice?
Nice model set.
It's a 144, which is cool because I'm building a space station that's also 144, and I make videos on it. So
Oh yes, sweet. We're going to end the show. We are going to end the show.
Yes, we are. You're damn right we are.
I'm gonna mention so I'm gonna mention two things from the live chat, and then like my final plugs and it's like my charity stuff. It's like so like Hermes Bivets gave you a super chat, like Steve. Remember back to when we were like talking about how we love watching like movies that we have seen 100 times. So they have memorized each and every single TOS Star Trek episode, the soundtrack. Steve, it asks me up anytime. I program it into my cell phone as well.
Thank you for the super chat, Hiram, and that is amazing.
And 255 AD mentioned back how the Star Wars, the whole 9 movies, was to be like those two droids, like R2D2 and C3PO, going through like all this words. As 255 AD is like, that description of the original Star Wars premise sounds like Forrest Gump, but with his he's the 2 robots.
Yeah, and it's 20 hours long.
Yes. One thing I do want to mention before I forget is we're of course there's links that page down in the description below.
Absolutely.
Please help out Joey Fire, Lane Deer if you can, and I promise Phoenix will share their links as well. Especially Phoenix that just put out coffee goal for $2,000. Hopefully to give some hope by the end of the year. So I'll drop those links down, and then let's see where's mine goes next.
Yes, sir.
I have something really quick, and it's not exactly a plug, but it's kind of a plug. So a lot of people have been, keep bugging me to say, Joe, when the hell are you gonna make videos again? And when are you gonna make videos? When are you gonna make videos? And I've been thinking about it. I think what I'm gonna do, I think I've realized the best way for me to make videos is to actually do live streams. Because when I did scripted stuff, I think my really short scripted videos were good. I think my longer scripted videos were not as good. And I one of the things that held me up from making a lot of the times is that, you're talking about something and, I could have said that better or whatever. And you have splicing bits and pieces and it just gets to be a mess. And a lot of times I don't think I spoke naturally, and I think I'm better when I'm riffing. And I realized we had a few years back, my friend Tony's son was interning for me, and he lived here because his home is far away. So he lived here in our house. And I described whatever the topic was. I described the whole circumstance to him just talking. And then I went to try to make a video of it. And I stammered and stuttered and was a mess. And he's like, Joe, you just threw that out to me in 4 minutes. And it was like cake. And I totally understood it. And why are you struggling now? I'm like, I don't know. But I noticed I don't really have a problem with that when I'm streaming. I don't know why. I don't know why. But mentally it's different to me. Yeah. So I thought, you know what, maybe that's the way to do it, is just, even if no one's watching, even if I don't have a co-host, just to get on and just say whatever I have to say, just because I think I just keep going. If I get stuck, I'll work myself out of it, as opposed to stopping and trying to re-record and and then sounding very stilted and very scripted. I just be natural and say what I have to say.
Yep. Hell yeah. I understand that. I mean, my stuff is all, for the most part, is all scripted now, but if it's just the way your brain works, or just where your aptitude is, if you don't do well working from a script, but what your point is and you sort of know where you want to get to, it can be easier to just be like, I'm just going to make it up, because you know where you're going. And like you said, if you go off on a tangent, or you end up somewhere you didn't want to be, you can work yourself back to where you need to get to. And it's easier than just struggling with, and also sometimes if you're working from a script, then you get in your head and you're like, okay, I said it, but I didn't say it exactly the way I wrote it.
Exactly.
Or the way I wrote it, now that I'm saying it out loud, it doesn't sound right. Now I've got to rewrite it in my head. And, it can lead to complications. So yeah, I think that's awesome. I hope you do that.
Thank you. Another thing too, and then it becomes, when you script it, it's a very iterative process. And I found that the last video I tried to script was about a year ago, and I just struggled and I just finally ended up giving up. And I realized, but then I talked about the same thing in a live stream with Raven, and I was like, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. I think too, there's something about the urgency of being live.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have an audience, it's the fact there might be an audience or people, is that you can't stop. You don't. There's not going to be any recuts. You're just going to say it and get it out.
Yeah. We're doing live. We're doing live.
Well, and not that I would recommend his advice in most areas to people because I think he's a terrible person. But Vince McMahon, Vince McMahon always used to say, because WWE back in the day would do mostly taped shows for their wrestling shows, but then they would also do live shows. And Vince McMahon would always say if people were nervous about going out and performing live when they were accustomed to being on tape, he would say it's live TV. There's no such thing as a mistake.
Yeah.
Because you're out there, you're doing your thing. Hey, whatever happens, happens. It's live TV. Everybody knows it.
Yeah.
Life
is live.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny though. It's funny. I'm actually less nervous live than I am scripted.
Yeah, that makes sense.
My brain doesn't. My brain works in mysterious ways.
Well, it's because you're basically giving expression to yourself when you're just out there doing it. When you're trying to operate from a script, you're trying to get the script just right and everything just right. And unless you're really talented at that, you can be a hash.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I would like to pitch something, not mine, but someone else's, a friend of the channel, Jesse Arrow, and Council of Geeks. They're doing a Babylon 5 podcast. They're going to start next year, and they still have the episodes up over at iTunes and other places that have podcasts. They're awesome in their analysis. And for me, who have been a Babylon 5 fan for a long time, it actually made me rethink a lot of points, especially the more, shall we say...
Who show is this? I missed that part.
Council of Geeks and Jesse Gender, yeah.
They do Babylon Jumpgate podcast. It's what's called.
Yeah.
So and they made me rethink, especially the more, shall we say, male-centric views that I held earlier in my life. Like, you know what? I get what you're saying there. That might be a point that I might have to think about.
Yeah. Well, and it's it's always nice to have an example and to be reminded that you can be critical of something and point out things about something that you don't think are right or that don't work for you and still like the thing. Like there's so much absolutist thinking on the internet where it's like, if you say anything critical about something, then it means you hate it and you wish it didn't exist. And it's like, no, I'm not saying that.
As Nina Sarkeesian said, every single one of her videos, it is possible, often necessary, to simultaneously critique the media that we enjoy, to enjoy media, but also be critical of some of your pernicious.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the most misunderstood thing I think about media criticism, both by people who watch it and by some people who do it. Is like the point isn't to tear things down. The point is to understand and to communicate and to express. Like you can talk about a movie that you think is bad and explain the reasons why you think it's bad, whatever those reasons are, whether it's because you just think it was a poorly written story, you don't think the plot made sense, or whether it's for a deeper thing, like it had a political message you thought was inappropriate, or it displays things that are sexist or racist or whatever. You can talk about those and say, okay, here's why this doesn't work for me. Here's why I think this is a problem. Here's something that we need to be aware of with this that maybe the people who made it weren't aware of, or whatever. And it doesn't mean that therefore it should not exist. Or it should be, all copies should be burned and no one should ever watch it. Like, no, that's not the point. The point is, it's not perfect. There may be some value in it. There may not be, but there is always value in talking about it and using it as a tool to understand.
That's the thing.
You just reminded me of a review that I heard by, her name was Lisa Carlin. She was the movie reviewer for CBS Radio in the New York area. And she did a review of The Invisible Man, with the one starring Kevin Bacon.
Hollow Man.
And she was very critical of it. But the thing that bothered me about what she said, it wasn't so much what she said. I didn't disagree with what she said. The problem was what she didn't say or left out. So part of her thing is that, obviously the character does a lot of misogynistic things. Once he becoming invisible, so he can, he's spying on women and doing a lot of misogynistic shit, right? So fair enough. So she was critical of that, but she was critical of the movie for displaying that. But I'm like, but what was the context? Like he's a bad guy. That's clearly part of it. He's a bad guy. He had this power and he did something bad with it. Now the movie can make it clear that that's a bad thing, or the movie can glorify it.
Right.
Or try to be neutral about it or whatever. And to me, that's the more important thing. It's like, to use a very extreme example, like Schindler's List, the Nazis are really bad, right? I mean, they're very anti-Semitic. And well, they're supposed to be. I mean, but that's the whole point. But the movie obviously isn't glorifying Nazism. It's showing how horrible it is, and how even how some people had to stand up to it, in a even if it's just a surreptitious way, so they didn't end up dead themselves. So the and that's the thing I was kind of bothered by by her review, because she didn't give, if she had said, look, this is just a misogynistic slog, okay, that's fair, but just to say, well, a character did something misogynistic and so the movie is bad because of that, I'm like, well, but without the context, it doesn't tell me.
It's really not looking past the surface.
You can depict something without endorsing it.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to tell. Like with certain movies, it's like, okay, are they showing us this because they want us to think it's bad, or sometimes it's tough to tell. But yeah, just because a movie shows a character doing something reprehensible, that doesn't necessarily count against the movie itself.
George Lucas was not rooting for Darth Vader, right?
Right, exactly. It's like you're not supposed to think, oh, that Darth Vader guy, he had some good points. Like, no.
And mind you, some people will point out that no matter how clear it might be to most of us, there's still some people who don't get it. Like, how many people lament Archie Bunker and say, oh, well, we couldn't make a show like that today because blah, blah, blah. And like, not understanding that, well, Archie Bunker is the main character. He's not the hero of the story.
Right. Exactly.
And even Archie Bunker evolves over time. So he actually learns over time. They never get it. They just look at Archie Bunker saying nasty shit, and they're like, "Well, I wish we could." And basically, they don't get it. They're like, they wish they could be that. And I'm like, yeah, but you're trying to be old Archie and not later Archie.
Exactly.
You didn't even learn from Archie's story.
And also, it's a lot of people can't tell the difference between humanizing a character and apologizing for a character, because all in the Family humanized Archie and presented him as someone that even though his views were reprehensible and we were usually supposed to laugh at the ridiculous things he said and the ridiculous views he held, he was still a human being, and we were still capable of having sympathy for him and empathy for him on a certain level, even if we were also meant to see his politics and his prejudices as bad. But a lot of people can't tell the difference. They think, anytime you humanize someone like that, you're automatically saying, well, he's a good guy, we should just tolerate him and tolerate his views. Like, that's not the point.
And what's funny about that, what's sad and funny about that, is that both people that hate the show and love either hate it or bemoan it not being around anymore. But so either whether they like Archie or like what he said or didn't like what he said, it's funny that they both those extremes missed the point of the show.
Right.
And that's the thing, and what people don't get, like, he's a proxy for the audience, because a lot of the audience members have those views, and it's basically saying, instead of stepping on the audience and saying you're a fucking horrible person because you have these views, it's saying, even otherwise good people have bad views, and that's not a good thing. And it basically, it kind of shed off the this kind of view that media used to have of the cartoon villain, where cartoon evil, where evil is always somebody wringing their hands and cackling
until next time.
The reality is that evil is very often not in one's motivations, it's in their methods.
Absolutely.
And you can look at a lot of evil that's been done in the real world, and the people who did it, they justified it because they thought that the ends justified the means, and if you look at their motivations might have actually been good in and of themselves, but because they were willing to do it on the back of other people.
The path to hell is paved with good intentions.
Absolutely.
And almost all evil people don't see themselves as evil.
They see themselves as the hero of the story.
Exactly.
So anyway, let's end the show.
Yes. Thank you, my unofficial producer. We're okay. As a group, we're probably going to keep talking a little bit after we go off the air, but for the purposes of the show, we're ending the show. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody who's here in the room with me or in the hangout with me, for supporting me and being a patron or a member, and to all people who are patrons and members of my channel. Thank you so much. I could not do this without you. Patreon.com/Steve Shives, or click the join button on the YouTube page to become a channel member. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all your support this year and all past years. And hope everybody has been having a good holiday, and I hope everybody has a good New Year's. And we'll be back to do this again in about a month. So
2024.
2024. Happy New Year, everybody. See you.
Bye.